The first midnight visitor. For exactly 11 years, someone placed fresh white lilies on Daniel Harper's grave. Every single night. Not every week. Not every anniversary. Every night. Always between midnight and 12:15. The cemetery caretaker swore he had never missed a single visit. Neither had the security cameras. That was the strange part, because no camera had ever captured the visitor's face, only the same dark overcoat, the same black umbrella, the same bouquet of white lilies, and every recording ended the same way. The stranger would kneel beside Daniel Harper's grave, remain completely motionless for exactly 2 minutes, then quietly disappear into the darkness before sunrise. No vandalism, no prayers, no visible emotion, just silence. For 11 years. Nobody knew why. Claire Harper had stopped visiting the cemetery long ago, not because she had forgotten her husband, because she couldn't bear watching strangers remember him better than she could. Daniel had died on a rainy November evening. Officially, a bridge collapse, 3 construction workers killed, case closed, insurance paid. The city rebuilt the bridge. Life continued, or at least, everyone expected it to. Claire tried. She sold their house, moved 40 miles away, changed jobs twice, avoided every road that crossed the river where Daniel died. But grief had a way of following people. Even after 11 years. She first heard about the midnight visitor from an unexpected phone call. "Mrs. Harper?" The elderly voice sounded hesitant. "My name is Walter Briggs. I take care of Oak Ridge Cemetery." Claire almost apologized. She assumed the cemetery was calling about unpaid maintenance fees. Instead, Walter asked one simple question. "Did your husband have a brother?" "A cousin who looked like him." Claire frowned. Walter remained silent for several seconds. Then he quietly replied, "I think someone still believes Daniel is alive." Claire laughed. Not because it was funny, because it was impossible. "I buried him." "I know," Walter answered softly. "I was there." Another pause. "But tomorrow night, I think you should come to see what I've been seeing." Claire almost declined. She had spent 11 years trying not to return. But curiosity is a powerful thing, especially when it arrives carrying impossible questions. The next evening, at exactly 11:47 p.m., Claire parked across from Oak Ridge Cemetery. Rain fell lightly across the empty road. Walter waited beneath the front gate. Neither of them spoke as they walked between rows of weathered headstones. Finally, they reached Daniel's grave. Fresh lilies already rested against the stone. Claire's heart stopped. "I didn't put those there." Walter nodded. "I know." He looked toward the tree line. "He'll be here soon." Claire followed his gaze. Midnight. The church bell rang once. Then, from somewhere beyond the old oak trees, a lone figure emerged from the darkness, wearing the same black overcoat, carrying another bouquet of white lilies, and as the stranger stepped beneath the nearest lamp, Claire dropped the flashlight, because the man walking toward her husband's grave moved exactly like Daniel. The man in the rain. The flashlight struck the wet stone path with a sharp crack. Its beam spun wildly across the cemetery before finally coming to rest against Daniel Harper's headstone. No one moved. Claire couldn't. Her heart hammered so violently she barely heard the rain. The man continued walking. Slow, measured, head lowered beneath a black umbrella. Every step, every slight shift of his shoulders, every movement of his hands matched Daniel perfectly. Not his face, his mannerisms, the unconscious habits no stranger could imitate. Walter leaned closer. "I told you," Claire whispered without taking her eyes off the approaching figure. "That's impossible," Walter nodded. "I've been saying the same thing for 11 years. The stranger reached the grave. Only then did he seem to notice they weren't alone. He stopped. For several seconds, no one spoke. Rain collected on the brim of his hat before dripping silently onto the bouquet of lilies. Claire finally forced herself to speak. "Who are you?" The man looked at her. His face remained hidden beneath shadow. "I'm sorry." His voice was calm, deep, completely unfamiliar. Not Daniel. Not even close. Relief washed through Claire, followed immediately by confusion. If it wasn't Daniel, why had he moved exactly like him? The stranger slowly knelt, placed the fresh lilies beside yesterday's bouquet, straightened the ribbon, then stood again. Walter stepped forward. "You've been coming here every night." "Yes." "For 11 years." "Yes." "Why?" The man looked toward Daniel's name engraved in the granite. "Because I owe him." Claire frowned. "Owe him what?" The stranger remained silent, then quietly answered, "My life." The rain became heavier. Claire searched his face. Mid-50s, gray at the temples, clean-shaven, ordinary. Nothing about him seemed remarkable, except his eyes. They never once looked directly at Daniel's name. Instead, they remained fixed on the dates beneath it. Born, died, as if he were silently checking something. Every night, for 11 years. Claire folded her arms. "If you knew my husband, why didn't you come to the funeral?" The stranger looked away. "I couldn't." "Why not?" "I wasn't allowed." Walter exchanged a quick glance with Claire. "Not allowed? By whom?" Claire took one careful step closer. "My husband died in a bridge collapse." The man answered immediately. Claire froze. "What?" He disappeared. The cemetery seemed to grow even quieter. "I buried him." "You buried someone." The stranger's voice remained steady. "But I don't believe it was Daniel Harper." Walter inhaled sharply. Claire stared at the man in disbelief. "You're insane." "I hoped I was." The stranger reached slowly inside his coat. Claire instinctively stepped backward. He removed a worn leather wallet, opened it, and carefully handed her a faded photograph protected inside clear plastic. 3 construction workers stood together beneath unfinished bridge supports. Claire recognized Daniel instantly. Young, smiling, covered in concrete dust. She almost handed the photograph back, then noticed something else. Standing beside Daniel was the stranger, much younger, with dark hair, and around both men's necks hung identical company identification badges. Claire looked up. "You worked together for 6 years." The man nodded. "My name is Michael Reeves. I was supposed to die that night." Lightning flashed across the cemetery. For one brilliant instant, Claire clearly saw the expression on Michael's face. Not guilt, not fear, regret, the kind that never fades. He reached into the wallet one final time. This time, he removed an old newspaper clipping. The headline read, "3 men killed in bridge collapse." Claire scanned the article. Daniel Harper, Thomas Ellis, Michael Reeves. She frowned, then looked back at the man standing in front of her. "Your name," she whispered, "is listed among the dead." Michael slowly nodded. "Exactly." The rain continued falling. Somewhere beyond the cemetery gates, a car engine started. Michael's expression changed instantly. He folded the newspaper, looked toward the road, then spoke the words that would destroy everything Claire believed she knew. "They finally found me." The 4th name. Michael Reeves didn't wait for questions. He grabbed Claire's wrist. "We have to leave." Claire pulled free. "I'm not going anywhere until you explain what you just said." Michael looked toward the cemetery entrance. Headlights swept briefly across the iron gates. "They're early." Walter frowned. "Who?" Michael ignored him. Instead, he reached down and picked up the bouquet of lilies from Daniel's grave. He turned it over. Beneath the white ribbon, a tiny black transmitter blinked once. Claire's stomach tightened. What is that? Michael crushed it beneath his boot. They've been tracking me. Walter stared. For 11 years. Michael nodded. They knew I'd keep coming here. The headlights disappeared. Whoever had driven past hadn't entered the cemetery. Not yet. Michael finally faced Claire. You deserve the truth. Claire crossed her arms. I've deserved it for 11 years. Michael nodded once. The bridge collapse was never an accident. Claire felt the words hit harder than she expected. There was an investigation. Yes, it found structural failure. Michael gave a bitter smile. It found exactly what someone wanted it to find. Walter quietly stepped back, allowing the two of them to speak. Rain dripped steadily from the old oak trees. Michael removed another folded document from inside his coat. This one wasn't a newspaper. It was a photocopy. Yellow with age. Across the top, Oak Ridge Infrastructure. Project Incident Report. Claire scanned the page. Crew members present: Daniel Harper, Michael Reeves, Thomas Ellis. She continued reading, then stopped. There was another name, a fourth worker. One she had never seen before. Nathan Cole. Claire looked up. The newspaper only listed 3 victims. Michael nodded. I know. This report lists 4 workers. I know. So where's Nathan Cole? Michael's expression darkened. That's the question that got people killed. Claire stared at the faded report. Someone had removed an entire person from history. No obituary, no death certificate, no mention in any newspaper. Nothing. As if Nathan Cole had never existed. Who was he? Michael looked toward Daniel's grave. He was the only one who knew why that bridge really collapsed. A branch snapped somewhere beyond the cemetery wall. Everyone froze. Walter switched off his flashlight. The darkness became almost complete. Michael whispered, "They're inside." Claire listened. Footsteps. Slow. Deliberate. More than one person. Not visitors. Not mourners. People moving carefully enough to avoid making noise. Walter leaned close. I've never seen security patrol this late. Michael shook his head. They're not security. A narrow beam of light swept across distant headstones. Then another. Flashlights. Systematic. Searching. Claire's pulse quickened. They're looking for you. Michael answered quietly. No. He looked directly at her. They're looking for whoever I finally decided to trust. Without warning, Michael knelt beside Daniel's grave. His fingers slid beneath the wet soil at the base of the headstone. Claire frowned. What are you doing? He dug only a few inches, then pulled free a small waterproof metal capsule, no larger than a cigar case. He pressed it into Claire's hands. I buried this the night after the funeral. Claire stared at it. What is it? The reason Daniel died. Before she could ask another question, voices echoed through the cemetery. There! Flashlights immediately turned toward them. Michael looked once toward the approaching lights, then back at Claire. Whatever happens, don't let them take that capsule. Claire tightened her grip. What about you? Michael smiled sadly. For 11 years, I've been waiting for someone to believe me. He stepped away from Daniel's grave. Not to run, to walk directly toward the approaching lights. As the first flashlight illuminated his face, one of the men shouted into a radio. We found Reeves. Then another voice answered through the static. Cold, calm, unmistakable. Bring him in. Claire couldn't see who had spoken, but Michael could. His face lost all color. He whispered only one name. Richard. The man called Richard. Richard. The name barely escaped Michael's lips. Then he raised both hands, not in surrender, in recognition, as though he had expected this moment for years. The flashlight stopped 20 feet away. 5 men, dark rain jackets, no company logos, no police insignia, only earpieces. The one in front stepped into the light. Late 60s. Silver hair. perfect posture. His umbrella never moved despite the wind. He smiled the way executives smiled before firing someone. "Michael," his voice carried effortlessly through the rain. "You've made this far more difficult than it needed to be." Michael didn't answer. Richard's eyes shifted briefly toward Daniel's grave, then to Claire. "So, you finally told someone." Claire stepped forward. "Who are you?" Richard ignored the question. Instead, he studied her carefully. "You must be Claire Harper. I've wanted to meet you for a long time." Claire felt a chill that had nothing to do with the weather. "You knew my husband." Richard gave a polite smile. "I approved his hiring." Walter quietly moved beside Claire. His voice remained low. "Do you know him?" Michael answered first. "His name is Richard Lawson, the former CEO of Meridian Infrastructure." Claire recognized the name instantly. Meridian, the company that had built the bridge, the company that had dissolved only months after the collapse, the company that no longer officially existed. Richard sighed. "Former CEO. I suppose that's technically correct." He looked almost amused. "What a strange thing to be remembered for." Claire held the metal capsule tightly inside her coat pocket. Richard noticed. His smile faded. "Michael, you gave it to her." Michael remained silent. Richard closed his umbrella. Rain soaked his expensive coat almost immediately. "You know, I spent 11 years hoping you'd make the sensible choice. You almost did. You disappeared. You stayed quiet. You even allowed the world to believe you were dead." He took one slow step forward. "But tonight, you became reckless." Claire interrupted. "What happened on that bridge?" Richard looked at her. For a brief moment, he seemed genuinely sympathetic. "Mrs. Harper, what happened that night was an unfortunate engineering failure." Michael laughed, a harsh, humorless sound. "You've rehearsed that sentence for 17 years. Richard's expression hardened. It worked. Silence settled again. Rain struck the headstones like distant applause. Finally, Richard looked directly at Claire. "May I ask you something?" She didn't answer. "When your husband's body was recovered, did you actually identify him?" Claire frowned. There wasn't much left. The coffin stayed closed. Richard nodded slowly. "As I thought." Michael closed his eyes. He had hoped Claire would never have to hear those words. Richard slipped a pair of black leather gloves from his pocket, carefully putting them on one finger at a time. "I dislike unnecessary violence. So let's make this simple." He extended one hand toward Claire. "The capsule. No, it doesn't belong to you. It never did." Claire stood her ground. Richard smiled again. "That's unfortunate." He snapped his fingers. The 4 men behind him immediately spread out. Not rushing, not shouting. They moved with practiced precision, closing every possible escape. Walter whispered, "They're boxing us in." Michael answered without taking his eyes off Richard. "They're boxing in the evidence." Richard spoke one final time. "If you open that capsule, you'll spend the rest of your life running." Claire's fingers tightened around the cold metal. "What if I don't?" Richard's smile disappeared completely. "Then you'll spend the rest of it wondering whether your husband actually died." The words struck harder than any threat. Claire's breathing became uneven. Michael saw it immediately. "Don't listen to him." Richard tilted his head. "Why not? It's the first honest thing I've said tonight." Then, without warning, a single gunshot echoed across Oak Ridge Cemetery, not fired at Claire, not at Michael. Walter cried out. The old caretaker collapsed onto the wet grass. Blood spread across his shoulder. For one frozen second, everyone stopped moving. Then Richard calmly lowered his eyes toward Walter and said, "I did warn you." The capsule Walter hit the ground hard. His flashlight rolled across the soaked grass, casting wild circles of light between the headstones. Claire instinctively rushed toward him. Michael grabbed her arm. "No!" Another shot cracked through the cemetery. This one struck the marble angel beside Daniel's grave. Stone exploded into white fragments. Richard lowered his hand. His expression never changed. "I said, I dislike unnecessary violence. You forced me to prove the point." Walter groaned. His shoulder bled heavily, but he was conscious. "I'm fine." Nobody believed him. Claire looked desperately toward the cemetery entrance. No passing cars, no witnesses, only rain. Richard had chosen the perfect place. The dead never called the police. Michael slowly stepped away from Claire. "If it's me you want, let them leave." Richard considered the offer. For a moment, it almost seemed reasonable. Then he smiled. If this were 11 years ago, perhaps. But tonight, my problem isn't you anymore. His eyes shifted toward Claire's coat pocket. "It's what's inside that capsule." Claire's heartbeat echoed in her ears. She could feel the cold metal pressing against her ribs. Small, heavy, completely ordinary. How could something so small terrify a man like Richard Lawson? She looked at Michael. "What is inside it?" Michael hesitated, then answered. "A key." Claire blinked. "A key?" Richard laughed softly. "He still doesn't trust you." Michael ignored him. "It isn't a normal key." Claire frowned. "Then what is it?" Michael looked directly into her eyes. "It opens something Daniel hid before the bridge collapsed." Richard slowly clapped. 3 quiet applauses. "Very good. You've almost told her the truth." Michael's jaw tightened. Richard continued. "But not all of it." Claire turned between them. "Someone tell me what's happening." Richard answered first. "Daniel Harper stole something," Michael shouted. "That's a lie!" Richard raised one eyebrow. "Did he remove documents from Site 12? Michael remained silent. "Did he hide them?" Silence again. Richard looked back at Claire. "You see? I didn't say he was a criminal. I said he stole something." Claire whispered, "What documents?" Richard's smile vanished. The kind that could destroy careers. The kind that could bankrupt governments. Lightning illuminated the cemetery. For one brilliant second, Claire noticed one of Richard's men moving quietly behind her. She spun. Too late. A gloved hand reached toward her coat. Michael reacted instantly. He tackled the man into a row of headstones. Both crashed violently against the wet granite. Another guard rushed forward. Then another. The cemetery erupted into chaos. "Run!" Michael's voice thundered across the graves. Claire hesitated only once. Walter. She couldn't leave him. The old caretaker forced himself onto one elbow, his face twisted with pain. "Go, now! They're not after me!" Another gunshot echoed. This time, the bullet shattered the iron cross above Daniel's grave. Claire turned and ran. Rain blinded her. Mud pulled at her shoes. Behind her, men shouted orders. Flashlights bounced wildly through the darkness. She reached the old oak trees bordering the cemetery, then stopped. Someone stood beneath the largest tree, completely still, watching everything. Not one of Richard's men. The figure stepped into the faint light. A woman, early 60s, gray coat, no umbrella despite the pouring rain. She looked directly at Claire, then quietly spoke the words that made Claire's blood run cold. "If Michael gave you the capsule, then Daniel knew you'd eventually come." Before Claire could answer, the woman held up an old photograph. It showed 4 construction workers standing beneath the unfinished bridge. Daniel Harper, Michael Reeves, Thomas Ellis, and the missing 4th man, Nathan Cole. The woman touched Nathan's face in the photograph, then looked back at Claire. "I'm his wife, and your husband died trying to save mine. The 4th widow." The woman never took her eyes off Claire. Rain streamed down her silver hair, but she didn't seem to notice. She held the faded photograph as though it were the only thing keeping her standing. "My name is Evelyn Cole." Claire stared at the picture again. Nathan, the missing fourth worker, the man erased from every official record. "You said, 'My husband died trying to save yours.'" Evelyn nodded slowly. "That's what Daniel chose, but it isn't what history says." Shouts echoed from deeper inside the cemetery. Richard's men were still searching. Flashlight beams danced between the gravestones. Michael was buying her time. Claire looked over her shoulder. "We have to leave." Evelyn didn't move. "No. They already know where I am." Claire frowned. "You've known Michael all this time? For 17 years. Why didn't either of you come forward?" Evelyn gave a weary smile. "We tried. The first 3 people who listened, all died within a year." The words hung heavily between them. Claire wanted to dismiss them as coincidence. But after tonight, coincidences were becoming difficult to believe. She looked again at the metal capsule hidden inside her coat. "What does this key open?" Evelyn's expression hardened. "Not a vault. Not a safe. A room." Claire blinked. "What room?" "A records room." A branch snapped nearby. Both women turned instantly. Only the wind. Or perhaps not. Evelyn lowered her voice. Daniel never cared about money. He cared about proof. Claire remembered her husband perfectly. He had always carried a small notebook, always wrote everything down. Measurements, dates, names, tiny observations nobody else noticed. "You knew him well." Evelyn smiled faintly, enough to know he never trusted memory. She unfolded the old photograph. On its back, someone had written 4 numbers. 7, 3, 1, 9. Claire felt her pulse quicken. 7, 3, 1. Michael had spoken that number before. The key, the station, the coincidence was impossible. "You've seen this before." Evelyn nodded. Daniel wrote it. The day before the bridge collapsed. For the first time that night. Claire began seeing a pattern. Locker 731. The key. The capsule. Daniel had been leaving a trail. Not for the police, not for Michael, for her. He had known. One day, she would have to finish what he started. But why wait 17 years? Claire asked the question aloud. Evelyn's eyes drifted toward the cemetery. Because 17 years ago, you wouldn't have believed him. Claire didn't answer. She knew Evelyn was right. Back then, she had trusted the official investigation completely. Everyone had. The city, the newspapers, the courts, even Daniel's own family. No one questioned the bridge collapse. No one questioned the closed coffin. No one questioned why Meridian infrastructure disappeared only months later. A sudden engine roared beyond the trees. Both women instinctively crouched. A black SUV rolled slowly along the narrow service road outside the cemetery fence. Its headlights remained off. Only the parking lights glowed faintly through the rain. The vehicle stopped. The driver's door opened. Richard Lawson stepped out alone. He wasn't searching anymore. He was waiting. Waiting for someone. Claire watched him remove a satellite phone from his coat. He spoke only one sentence before ending the call. "Seal the station." Then he looked directly toward the woods, toward them, though they were hidden, though he couldn't possibly see them. He smiled, as if he already knew exactly where they were. Evelyn's face turned pale. "We're too late," Claire whispered. "Too late for what?" Evelyn folded the photograph and pressed it into Claire's hand. "They're going to destroy everything Daniel left behind." "Where?" Evelyn met her eyes. Union Station. The room behind Locker 731. Locker 731. Union Station had been closed for nearly 12 years. The city called it unsafe. The newspapers called it abandoned. But Daniel Harper had never referred to it that way. Claire suddenly remembered something. One winter evening, Years before the bridge collapse, Daniel had come home unusually quiet. When she asked where he had been, he had answered with only 3 words. The old station. At the time, she thought nothing of it. Now, those 3 words echoed louder than the gunshots in the cemetery. Evelyn drove. Claire sat in the passenger seat, clutching the metal capsule so tightly her knuckles had turned white. The windshield wipers struggled against the rain. Neither woman spoke for nearly 15 minutes. Finally, Claire broke the silence. "Why didn't Daniel tell me?" Evelyn kept her eyes on the road. "Because he loved you." Claire frowned. "That doesn't answer my question." "It does." Evelyn sighed. "The moment he told you, you would have become part of it." Claire stared out the window. Every mile brought another memory. Daniel locking filing cabinets she had never been allowed to open. Phone calls that ended the moment she entered the room. Weekend trips explained as inspection work. She had never questioned any of it. Trust wasn't something they discussed. It simply existed. Until tonight. Union Station emerged through the rain like the skeleton of another century. Broken windows, collapsed platforms, rust covering every rail. A faded clock above the entrance remained frozen at 11:18. It hadn't moved since the station closed. Evelyn parked 2 blocks away. No headlights. No doors. We go in through the freight tunnel. Claire looked toward the massive stone building. "How do you know all this?" Evelyn answered quietly. "Because Nathan designed the hiding place." They crossed the empty street on foot. The city felt strangely silent. Too silent. Claire noticed something odd. No police tape. No security patrol. No homeless camps. For a building abandoned more than a decade, it seemed almost protected, as if people instinctively stayed away, or had been told to. The freight tunnel entrance was hidden behind rusted delivery docks. A heavy steel gate blocked the opening. Claire expected Evelyn to stop. Instead, she walked directly to the old padlock, ran her fingers underneath it, then pulled free a tiny magnetic key taped beneath the metal. Claire blinked. "How long has that been there?" 17 years. "You knew?" "I knew where Nathan hid it." The lock opened with a dull click. The tunnel smelled of damp concrete and machine oil. Their footsteps echoed endlessly. Halfway through, Claire noticed numbers painted on the wall: 727, 728, 729, 730, then 731. Unlike the others, the number had been painted over 3 different times, as though someone desperately wanted it to disappear. Evelyn stopped. "This wall," Claire frowned. "It's solid," Evelyn smiled faintly. So everyone believed. She reached beneath an old electrical box, pressed something hidden underneath. A heavy mechanical sound echoed through the tunnel. Dust rained from the ceiling. Then, the concrete wall marked 731 slowly slid sideways. Behind it, a narrow passage descended into darkness. Cold air rushed upward. Claire aimed her flashlight inside. Metal shelves, old filing cabinets, rows of waterproof storage cases, everything perfectly organized, untouched. It wasn't a hiding place. It was an archive. Daniel hadn't hidden evidence. He had built an entire secret records room beneath Union Station. Claire stepped inside. Her flashlight swept across hundreds of labeled boxes. Bridge design, inspection reports, payments, contractors, photographs, voice recordings. Then, near the center of the room, she saw a wooden desk. On it rested an old cassette recorder. Beside it, a single sealed envelope. Across the front, written in Daniel Harper's unmistakable handwriting, were 6 words. "If Claire finds this, I was right." Before Claire could reach for the envelope, every light inside the room suddenly went out. The tunnel door behind them slammed shut. Darkness swallowed everything. Then, from somewhere deeper inside the archive, A calm male voice echoed through the blackness. "She's here." And she brought the key. It wasn't Richard Lawson. It wasn't Michael Reeves. It was someone neither woman recognized. Someone who had been waiting inside the archive all along. The man in the archive, Claire froze. The voice had come from somewhere beyond the rows of filing cabinets. Not loud, not threatening. Simply waiting. The room remained completely dark. Only the faint emergency light from the tunnel ceiling leaked beneath the sealed steel door. It wasn't enough to see faces, only outlines. Evelyn whispered, "We're not alone. Botama." The voice answered, "You never were." A flashlight clicked on, not pointed at them. At the floor, just enough to illuminate a pair of polished leather shoes. The man holding the light stepped forward slowly. Late 50s, dark gray suit. No weapon visible. Silver-rimmed glasses. Calm eyes. Almost academic. He looked more like a history professor than someone hiding beneath an abandoned train station. "My name is Henry Whitaker." Claire had never heard it before. "You've been waiting for us?" Henry nodded. "For 17 years. Claire instinctively reached inside her coat. The capsule was still there. Henry noticed. "Good. You didn't let Richard take it. You know Richard Lawson. I know everyone involved." He looked toward Evelyn. "And I'm sorry you had to come back here." Evelyn's shoulders relaxed for the first time that night. "You survived." Henry smiled faintly. "Barely." Claire looked between them. "You know each other. We all worked together." Henry answered. "Nathan, Daniel, Michael, myself. We were 4 engineers." Claire frowned. "There were only 4? Henry's smile disappeared. "No. There were 5. Silence. Claire stared. 5? Henry nodded. "That's the first lie they ever told." He walked toward one of the steel cabinets, unlocked it, removed a faded personnel photograph. 5 men stood beneath the unfinished bridge. Daniel Harper, Michael Reeves, Nathan Cole, Henry Whitaker, and one final man standing in the center. Richard Lawson. Claire felt her stomach tighten. "No." Henry placed the photograph on the desk. "Richard wasn't above us. He wasn't investigating us. He was one of us." Claire looked closer. Every man wore the same project badge, the same company logo, the same date, the same bridge. Richard had spent 17 years pretending to clean up a disaster that he had helped create. "Why?" Claire whispered. Henry answered immediately. "Because the bridge wasn't the project." Claire looked up. "Then what was?" Henry walked toward the cassette recorder sitting on Daniel's desk. He rested one hand gently on it. The bridge was only the cover. Claire's pulse quickened. For what? Henry looked directly into her eyes. For moving something nobody was supposed to know existed. Evelyn slowly closed her eyes. She had hoped Claire would never hear those words. Henry continued. "Officially, we transported reinforced steel, concrete, heavy equipment." He paused. "In reality, we transported sealed government containers." Claire frowned. What was inside them? Henry shook his head. Even we weren't told. But Daniel became suspicious. Because the shipping manifests never matched the weight. Claire suddenly remembered Daniel sitting awake at the kitchen table, night after night. Calculator, notebook, blueprints. Always calculating, always checking numbers. She had teased him once. "You think too much." Daniel had smiled. "No, I think someone else isn't thinking enough." At the time, she thought he meant construction safety. Now, she realized he had been talking about something much larger. Henry carefully picked up the sealed envelope addressed to Claire. He handed it to her. "I promised Daniel, if you ever reached this room, you would open this first." Claire stared at her husband's handwriting. Her hands trembled. She broke the seal. Inside, there was only a single folded page. No explanation, no confession, just one handwritten sentence. Claire read it once, Then again. Her face drained of color. Evelyn stepped closer. What did he write? Claire could barely speak. He says, if Henry is still alive, don't trust him. The room fell silent. Henry didn't look surprised. He slowly removed his glasses, closed his eyes, then quietly said, I wondered how long it would take him to warn you about me. Daniel's last rule. Claire read the sentence a third time. The handwriting was unmistakable. Daniel's careful block letters, the way he always crossed his sevens, the tiny slash beneath every capital T. There was no mistake. If Henry is still alive, don't trust him. Henry remained perfectly still, almost as though he had expected those words. I suppose, he said quietly. He never stopped doubting anyone. Claire folded the note, slowly, carefully, then stepped backward. You lied. Henry didn't argue. What exactly did I lie about? You said Daniel trusted you. Henry nodded once. He did. Until the final week. Evelyn looked between them. What happened? Henry's eyes drifted toward the shelves lining the hidden archive. Daniel changed. He stopped discussing evidence. He stopped sharing documents. He stopped coming to meetings. Michael thought Daniel was becoming paranoid. Nathan believed someone was following us. Richard! Henry paused. Richard believed Daniel had stolen everything. Claire asked quietly, had he? Henry smiled sadly. No, he had copied everything. Claire frowned. What's the difference? The originals disappeared. The copies survived. Henry looked around the room. They're here. Claire slowly turned. Hundreds of boxes, thousands of pages, audio tapes, blueprints, photographs, shipping logs. Every cabinet represented another piece of Daniel's investigation. It wasn't just evidence, it was 17 years of insurance. Daniel had built a vault no one could erase. Claire's thoughts raced. If Richard knew this place existed, why didn't he destroy it years ago? Henry answered immediately, because he couldn't find it. Claire frowned, but he knew about locker 731. He knew the number. He knew the station. Henry nodded. He knew the entrance. But Daniel changed the mechanism. Only one key opens it. Claire instinctively touched the metal capsule inside her coat. So this is the only key. Henry nodded. The only one. For the first time since entering the archive, Claire noticed something strange. None of the filing cabinets had dust on them, not even the highest shelves. Someone had been maintaining this room, regularly. She looked at Henry. You've been living here. Henry smiled faintly. Not living, working. For 17 years. Claire noticed fresh coffee in a mug, a recently sharpened pencil, a modern laptop sitting beside the old cassette recorder. Someone hadn't been hiding. Someone had been cataloging. Every single document, every tape, every photograph. Evelyn suddenly walked toward one of the cabinets. She stopped. Her breathing became uneven. Nathan. Henry followed her gaze. Inside the cabinet were dozens of folders. Each carried a different name. Police officers, inspectors, judges, journalists, city officials. Every file included photographs, addresses, timelines. Some folders were marked deceased, others missing. Claire felt cold. What is this? Henry answered softly. Everyone who ever tried reopening the bridge investigation. Silence settled over the archive. 17 years, dozens of people, some dead, some vanished. All connected to one bridge, Claire whispered. This was never an accident. Henry looked directly at her. It became an operation. Before anyone spoke again, a low vibration echoed through the concrete floor. Once. Then again. Henry's expression changed instantly. No. He hurried toward a security monitor mounted near the far wall. The screen flickered to life. Black and white camera feeds appeared. Tunnel entrance, freight corridor, main archive door. Every image showed the same thing: armed men flooding into the station. Not 5, not 10, at least 20. Claire recognized Richard immediately. He wasn't leading them. He was walking behind another man. Someone taller, older, white hair, military posture. The others moved only after he moved. Henry's face turned pale. Claire had not seen fear in him until now. She looked at the monitor. "Who is that?" Henry whispered. The only man Daniel was ever truly afraid of. The older man stopped directly in front of the hidden steel door. He looked straight into the security camera, as though he knew Henry was watching. Then he smiled and quietly said, "Open the archive. I know you're all inside." The general, no one moved. The older man remained perfectly still before the security camera. He wasn't carrying a weapon. He didn't need to. Everyone around him seemed to wait for the slightest movement of his hand before taking their next step. Richard Lawson stood half a step behind him. Not beside him. Behind him. Claire noticed it immediately. Richard wasn't in charge. He never had been. Henry whispered, "I thought he was dead." Evelyn stared at the monitor. So did everyone else. Claire looked between them. "Who is he?" Neither answered. The man outside the archive glanced briefly at his watch, then spoke into the camera again. "You have 60 seconds. After that, we come in." The transmission ended. Henry turned away from the monitor. His face had become noticeably older in the last few seconds. "There isn't much time." Claire stepped toward him. "I asked who he is." Henry hesitated, then answered, "General Arthur Caldwell." Claire frowned. "A general? Retired?" Henry shook his head. "Officially. But some people never truly retire." Evelyn closed her eyes. "Nathan warned us. He said if Caldwell ever appeared in person, it meant the secret was already too big to bury." Claire looked back at the monitor. Arthur Caldwell, nearly 75. White hair, perfect posture, not one unnecessary movement. He looked less like a soldier, and more like a man accustomed to giving orders that changed history. Henry opened one of the steel drawers beneath the desk. Inside were dozens of cassette tapes, everyone carefully labeled. Date, location, subject. He removed only one. The oldest. Its label read, November 147. 42 p.m. Final recording. Claire felt her pulse quicken. The night Daniel died. Henry nodded. The last conversation. Claire reached for the cassette. Henry stopped her. "You don't have time to hear all of it. Then tell me." "I can't." "Why not?" "Because you won't believe me." Claire's patience snapped. "I stopped believing impossible things 5 chapters ago." Henry inserted the cassette into the recorder, pressed play. Static filled the archive. Then, Daniel's voice, older than Claire remembered. Calm. Focused. "If anyone finds this, my name is Daniel Harper. I've confirmed the containers are real. They're moving them through the bridge because nobody inspects infrastructure shipments." Claire covered her mouth. She hadn't heard her husband's voice in 17 years. Not once. Now, he was alive again, only through magnetic tape. Another voice interrupted. "Michael, we don't have enough proof." Daniel answered immediately. "We don't need more proof. We need someone outside the project." Nathan's voice joined next. "They're coming." Then, a fourth voice. Richard Lawson. Calm. Confident. "Daniel, you're making a mistake." Claire froze. Richard hadn't always been the enemy. At least, not openly. The tape continued. Daniel spoke again. "If something happens to me, Claire must never know." Henry quietly stopped the recorder. Claire stared. "Why did you stop it?" "Because the next sentence changes everything." "I don't care. You will." Henry slowly removed the cassette, placed it back into its case, then looked directly at Claire. "The next sentence names the person who ordered the bridge collapse." Claire's breathing became uneven. "Then, play it." Henry didn't move. Outside, a heavy metallic boom echoed through the tunnel. The first explosive charge. The steel archive door trembled. Dust fell from the ceiling. Arthur Caldwell wasn't waiting anymore. He had started breaking in. Henry looked toward the shaking door, then back at Claire. "I'll only play the rest, if you're willing to accept that everything you've believed about Daniel's death was built on one enormous lie." Before Claire could answer, every light in the archive suddenly switched to emergency power. A computerized voice echoed through the room. "Unauthorized breach detected. Archive lockdown disengaged." Then another mechanical sound followed. Not from the entrance, from somewhere behind them. A hidden wall inside the archive slowly slid open, revealing a second room that none of them knew existed. The hidden wall moved with a slow mechanical groan. Dust drifted through the emergency lights like falling ash. No one spoke. Even Henry looked stunned. "I didn't," he whispered, "know this existed." Claire stared at him. "You've been here for 17 years. Henry nodded without taking his eyes off the opening. "I cataloged every shelf, every cabinet, every tunnel. But never this room. The passage beyond was surprisingly clean. No dust, no cobwebs, no rust. Someone had maintained it. Recently, the walls were lined with polished concrete instead of old brick. Electrical conduits disappeared into the ceiling, modern security cameras, fresh LED emergency lights. This section had been built years after the station closed." Claire felt a chill. Daniel hadn't just hidden evidence. Someone else had continued building beneath the archive. Another explosion shook the outer tunnel. The steel archive door groaned. Richard's team was getting closer. Henry looked toward the entrance. "We have maybe 4 minutes." Claire pointed toward the newly opened passage. "Then move." The corridor ended at a thick steel door. Unlike everything else in the station, this one had no rust, only a small electronic keypad, and beneath it, a circular key slot. Henry immediately looked at Claire's coat pocket. The capsule. Claire removed it. For the first time, she examined it carefully. It wasn't a capsule at all. It was a precision-machined metal cylinder, one end twisted loose. Inside rested a short titanium key. No markings, only 3 engraved numbers. 7, 3, 1. Evelyn inhaled sharply. "Nathan built this." Henry nodded. "No." Daniel finished it. Claire inserted the key. Nothing happened. Henry frowned. "It should open." Claire tried turning it. Still nothing. Then she noticed something beside the keypad. 4 empty spaces. A code. She remembered the photograph Evelyn had shown her. 7, 3, 1, 9. 7, 3, 1, 9. She entered the numbers. The keypad flashed red. Access denied. Another violent impact echoed through the archive. The outer steel door bent inward. Richard's men had reached it. Henry looked at the security monitor. "They're cutting through." Claire's breathing quickened. She stared again at the keypad. Daniel never chose random numbers. Everything meant something. Then, she remembered the frozen station clock, 11:18. The clock that had never moved. She typed 1118. The keypad flashed green. Henry looked at her in disbelief. "How?" Claire whispered. "Our anniversary." The lock disengaged. With a heavy hydraulic hiss, the steel door slowly opened. Inside was not another archive. It was a command center. Large digital displays covered one wall. Satellite maps, construction blueprints, financial records, dozens of hard drives, 3 server racks still humming quietly, everything powered, everything active, as though someone had walked out only minutes earlier. On the center desk, a single computer monitor glowed. No password screen, No desktop. Only one sentence. "Welcome back, Claire. If you are reading this," I failed. Claire felt the air leave her lungs. Henry slowly approached the keyboard. He stopped. A small webcam mounted above the monitor suddenly activated. Its green light blinked once. Then a familiar voice filled the room. Not a recording. Not magnetic tape. Crystal clear digital audio. Daniel Harper. "Claire. If you are hearing this, then Henry survived." Claire instinctively looked toward Henry. Daniel continued, "And if Henry survived, do not let him touch the keyboard." Henry froze. The room became completely silent. Then, very slowly, Henry raised both hands away from the computer, not because he had been accused, but because he already knew Daniel was going to say it. Outside the command center, a deafening metallic crash echoed through the station. Richard's team had broken through the archive door. They were less than a minute away. Daniel's voice. No one breathed. Daniel's voice echoed through the hidden command center with impossible clarity. Not emotional, not frightened, methodical. Exactly as Claire remembered. If you're hearing this, then my timeline was wrong. I hoped none of this would ever happen. But hope isn't evidence. Claire felt tears gathering in her eyes. She wanted to answer, to tell him she was here, to tell him she had finally found him. Instead, she listened. The monitor changed. A timestamp appeared. Recorded November 138:41 p.m. One day before the bridge collapse, Daniel had known. He had known something terrible was coming. "If Henry is standing beside you," Daniel continued, "he's going to tell you he protected the archive." Henry lowered his head. Daniel's voice remained calm. "He did." Claire glanced toward Henry. "But that's only half the truth." Henry quietly whispered, "I knew you'd say that." The screen split into two images. On the left, blueprints of the bridge. On the right, a financial ledger. Millions of dollars moving through shell companies. Daniel continued, "Henry wasn't working for Richard. He was working for me." Claire blinked. Henry slowly looked up. "But," Daniel's tone changed. "The day before the collapse, someone approached Henry. They offered him a choice. Help them recover the evidence, or watch everyone you love disappear." Claire looked toward Evelyn. She had stopped breathing. Daniel continued. "Henry refused. For 6 hours. Then, he accepted." Silence. Henry closed his eyes. "I had no choice," Daniel answered through the recording. "That's what you've told yourself for 17 years. Outside." Automatic gunfire echoed somewhere beyond the archive. Richard's men weren't trying to negotiate anymore. Heavy footsteps filled the tunnel. The hidden command center suddenly felt much smaller. Daniel's recording ignored the chaos. "Henry betrayed me." Claire looked sharply toward him. "But," Daniel continued before she could speak, "he also saved my life." Henry's eyes filled with tears. "I couldn't stop them." He whispered, "I could only delay them." Daniel's voice softened. "If you're confused, you should be, because betrayal isn't always simple." Claire slowly lowered herself into the chair before the monitor. Everything she thought she understood had become blurred. Henry had betrayed Daniel. Henry had also saved him. Both were true. The recording advanced automatically. A new image appeared. Security footage. November 146:52 p.m. The bridge. 4 men carried sealed military containers beneath the unfinished structure. Daniel, Nathan, Michael, Henry. Then, a 5th figure entered the frame. Richard Lawson. He wasn't supervising. He was helping move the containers. Seconds later, Another man appeared beside Richard. Older, military posture. Arthur Caldwell. Claire stared. General Caldwell had been there that night. Not afterward. Not covering it up. He had been part of the operation from the beginning. Daniel paused for several seconds before speaking again. This is the last time all 6 of us were together. Claire frowned. 6. She counted the people in the video. Daniel, Henry, Nathan, Michael, Richard, Arthur. 6. But Arthur wasn't an engineer. Why had Daniel counted him as part of the group? Then Daniel answered the question she hadn't asked. Arthur Caldwell never commanded the operation. Claire's pulse quickened. He only delivered the orders. Another explosion shook the concrete walls. The emergency lights flickered violently. Daniel spoke one final sentence before the recording automatically stopped. If Arthur answered to someone else. Find the person who never appeared on any document. The monitor went black. For several seconds, only the sound of distant drilling echoed through the command center. Then, every screen in the room suddenly lit up by itself. A live security feed appeared, not from the station, from outside. Someone was watching the building from above, a drone. The camera slowly zoomed toward the station roof. Claire's blood ran cold. There weren't 20 men surrounding Union Station anymore. There were nearly 50, and parked behind them were 3 identical black government vehicles bearing no license plates. Richard Lawson hadn't come to recover evidence. He had come to erase everyone inside. The dead switch, no one spoke. The drone hovered silently above Union Station. Its infrared camera scanned every entrance, every broken window, every possible escape route. Henry stared at one of the monitors. They're preparing for containment. Claire looked at him. Containment? They don't intend to arrest anyone. Another screen suddenly flashed red. Motion detected. Lower tunnel. Claire watched 3 figures moving through the freight corridor. Richard. 2 armed men. Nothing unusual. Then, a 4th figure appeared behind them. Arthur Caldwell. He wasn't rushing. He wasn't giving orders. He simply walked. Everyone else adjusted their pace to match his. Henry whispered, "He always does that." Claire frowned. What? He never hurries. Because he already knows how everything ends. Evelyn turned away from the monitors. "We can't stay here." Henry nodded. "I know." He walked toward the center console. Unlocked a steel drawer beneath the keyboard. Inside, 3 identical hard drives rested inside shock-proof cases. Each carried the same handwritten label. Dead switch, Claire frowned. "What is that?" Henry carefully picked up one of the drives. "Daniel's insurance policy." Claire looked confused. Henry continued. "If the archive was ever compromised, everything would automatically be released. Every document, every recording, every financial transfer, every name." Claire looked around the command center. "So why hasn't it happened?" Henry remained silent, then quietly answered, "Because Daniel never finished it." The words hung in the air. Claire looked back at the glowing computer. He failed. Henry nodded. He was 1 step away. Evelyn slowly approached the desk. What was missing? Henry looked directly at Claire. "Authorization." Claire frowned. "From who?" "You." Silence. Claire laughed once, not because it was funny, because it made no sense. "I've never even been here." Henry nodded. "I know. But Daniel designed the system that way. No one, not even me, could activate it. Only Claire Harper." Another explosion rocked the archive behind them. This one, much closer. Dust poured from the ceiling vents. Richard's team had entered the archive itself. Henry checked the security feed. "They're less than 30 seconds away." Claire looked at the keyboard. "What do I do?" Henry hesitated, then stepped backward. "I can't touch it." "You heard Daniel." The computer monitor suddenly changed. "Welcome, Claire. Voice authorization required. Please state your name." Claire stared. Her throat had gone dry. Henry nodded. Go ahead. She stepped closer. My name, she swallowed, is Claire Harper. The computer paused. Voice matching. 5 long seconds. Then, identity confirmed. Welcome, Claire. The room suddenly came alive. Every monitor lit simultaneously. Maps, bank accounts, photographs, surveillance videos, satellite imagery. Thousands of files unlocked in seconds. Evelyn whispered. Oh my God. Henry closed his eyes. It works. Then the system displayed a countdown. Data release, manual confirmation required 200. Claire frowned. 2 minutes? Henry nodded. Daniel never wanted anyone making this decision without thinking. Claire looked at the screen. Confirm? Yes, no, just 2 buttons. Nothing more. 2 minutes to decide whether to expose everything or destroy 17 years of sacrifice. A deafening crash echoed from outside the command center. The hidden door burst inward. Steel twisted. Concrete shattered. Richard Lawson entered first. His pistol lowered. Arthur Caldwell followed. Calm as ever. He looked directly at Claire, then at the countdown. 1:47. He smiled. Oh, you actually found it. Claire stepped in front of the console. Richard raised his weapon. Step away. Arthur quietly lifted one hand. Richard immediately lowered the pistol. Arthur spoke softly. Violence is unnecessary. He looked at Claire with almost grandfatherly patience. You don't understand what that button really does. Claire didn't answer. Arthur took one slow step forward. It won't expose corruption. It will expose something far larger. He looked at the countdown. 1:31. Then back into Claire's eyes. If you press yes, millions of innocent people will lose faith in their own government overnight. The room fell completely silent. Then Arthur said the one sentence that changed everything. Daniel understood that. That's why he never pressed it himself. The button Daniel. Never pressed, no one spoke. The countdown continued. 1:28. Claire looked at Arthur Caldwell. His face remained calm. Too calm, as though he had repeated this conversation countless times. You expect me to believe Daniel protected you? Arthur shook his head. No. I expect you to believe Daniel protected everyone else. Richard Lawson shifted impatiently. General. Arthur raised one finger. Richard fell silent immediately. Claire noticed it again. Richard feared this man. Not respected. Feared. Arthur slowly removed an old leather notebook from inside his coat. He placed it gently on the desk. I've carried this for 17 years. Claire frowned. What is it? Daniel's. Henry's head snapped upward. No. Arthur nodded. He gave it to me. Personally. Henry's voice hardened. That's impossible. I was there. Arthur looked at him. No. You were unconscious. Claire stared at the worn notebook. Daniel's initials were burned into the cover. D.H. She knew it instantly. She had bought it for him on his 34th birthday. Open it, Arthur said quietly. Claire hesitated, then did. Most of the pages contained engineering calculations, weight distributions, load tolerances, bridge stress formulas. Exactly what she expected. Until the final page. Only one sentence had been written there. If exposing the truth destroys the country, then it isn't justice. Claire's breathing slowed. It sounded exactly like Daniel. Measured, practical, never emotional. Henry stepped forward. Read the page before it. Claire turned back one sheet. There. Daniel had written dozens of names, everyone connected to the bridge project. Some were circled, some crossed out. One name remained underlined 3 times. Arthur Caldwell. Claire looked up immediately. Arthur didn't react. Henry spoke. He knew. He knew Arthur was behind everything. Arthur sighed. No. He knew I was trying to stop it. Richard laughed. The sound echoed through the command center. General, I warned you. They'll never believe you. Arthur ignored him. Instead, he looked at Claire. You've spent 17 years believing Daniel died because someone wanted to silence him. Claire nodded slowly. Arthur answered. That's only half the story. The countdown reached 00:59. 1 minute. Every monitor in the room flashed. Data release ready. Claire's heart pounded. Then tell me the other half. Arthur took one slow breath. Daniel wasn't murdered because of what he discovered. He was murdered because he refused to use it. Silence. Even Richard stopped smiling. Arthur continued. The evidence in this room can destroy thousands of innocent lives along with the guilty. It exposes intelligence officers, undercover assets, foreign operations, people who had nothing to do with corruption. Claire looked at the endless files surrounding her. For the first time, she realized Daniel hadn't built an archive. He had built a weapon. Henry slammed both hands onto the desk. Don't listen to him. Arthur calmly met his eyes. Am I lying? Henry said nothing. Arthur looked back at Claire. The files are authentic. So is the corruption. But once released, you can never choose what the world believes. The countdown reached 00:41. Claire's hands hovered above the keyboard. Yes. No. Neither option felt right anymore. Daniel had left the decision to her, not because it was easy, because he couldn't make it himself. Suddenly, the computer emitted a sharp warning tone. A new message appeared. Second authorization detected. Henry frowned. There shouldn't be another authorization. Arthur's expression changed for the first time. Confusion. The monitor switched to another security feed. Not from the tunnels, from the station roof. A lone figure had entered through a maintenance hatch, moving quickly, avoiding every surveillance camera. Richard stared at the screen. Who the hell is that? The figure reached the ventilation shaft, removed a backpack, then looked directly into one of the rooftop cameras. For a single frame, Claire saw his face. Michael Reeves. Alive, covered in blood. Still carrying Daniel's old canvas field bag. Henry whispered. No. He found the second key. Then, every monitor in the room instantly went black. Only one sentence remained glowing in white letters across the central screen. Dead switch override activated. Second administrator online. The second administrator, every monitor remained black. The only light in the command center came from the emergency lamps overhead. Across the center display, one sentence pulsed slowly. Dead switch override activated. Second administrator online. No one spoke. Richard Lawson was the first to recover. Impossible. His voice was barely above a whisper. There was never a second administrator. Henry answered without looking away from the screen. There wasn't. Claire turned sharply. You just said. Henry nodded. I know what I said. So who activated it? Henry didn't answer, because he already knew. Far above them. A metallic clang echoed through the ventilation system. Someone was moving across the ductwork. Not running. Crawling. Purposefully. Richard glanced toward the ceiling. He's inside. Arthur Caldwell remained perfectly calm. Yes, he always was. Claire frowned. What does that mean? Arthur looked at her. It means Michael Reeves stopped running 17 years ago. He started waiting. The central monitor flickered. Static rolled across the screen. Then, a live camera feed appeared. Not from the station. Not from the drone. From inside the ventilation shaft, Michael Reeves looked directly into the camera. His face was streaked with blood. One sleeve had been torn away. His breathing was heavy, but his eyes were steady. He wasn't speaking to Richard, or Henry, or Arthur, only to Claire. Claire. If you're seeing this, I made it farther than Daniel thought I would. Richard stepped toward the monitor. You recorded this? Michael smiled faintly. No, I'm recording it now. Claire felt the room spin. It's live? Henry nodded. He found the maintenance network. Michael adjusted the camera clipped to his jacket. I don't have much time. They've sealed the upper tunnels. I can't reach you, but I can reach the system. He lifted Daniel's old canvas field bag into view. The second key wasn't a key. Claire frowned. What is it? Michael unzipped the bag. Inside rested a battered military laptop. Gray. Scratched. Almost 20 years old. Across the lid, Daniel had written one word in black marker. Mirror. Henry's expression changed instantly. Oh, no. Claire looked at him. What? Henry whispered. Daniel copied the archive. Richard's face drained of color. Arthur closed his eyes. For the first time, the general looked genuinely worried. Michael opened the laptop. Its screen illuminated his face. The archive under Union Station was never the original. Claire blinked. What? Michael nodded. It was the decoy. Silence filled the room. Henry slowly sank into a chair. I searched this place for years. Michael gave a tired smile. I know. Daniel wanted you to. Claire struggled to understand. Then where's the real archive? Michael looked directly into the camera. You've been carrying the map all night. Claire instinctively reached into her coat. The folded photograph. Daniel. Michael. Nathan. Henry. On the back. 7319. She unfolded it again. This time, she noticed something she had missed before. The numbers weren't written in a straight line. They formed four corners of a square, and between them, Daniel had drawn an almost invisible compass. North, south, east, west. It wasn't a code. It was a coordinate marker. Arthur stepped forward for the first time. Michael. His voice remained calm. Listen to me. Michael ignored him. Instead, he looked at Claire. Daniel didn't leave you evidence. He left you a choice. Claire whispered. What choice? Michael took a long breath. The archive behind you can expose everyone. The real archive can prove only the guilty. The room fell completely silent. Henry looked at Arthur. Arthur looked at Michael. Richard looked terrified. Claire realized something profound. Everyone had been fighting over the wrong archive for 17 years. Then Michael said the sentence that froze every person in the room. Richard, tell Claire where Daniel really died. Richard's lips parted, but no words came. Michael's eyes hardened. You owe him that much. Richard slowly lowered his head, and after 17 years of silence, he finally whispered, Daniel never died on the bridge, the place without a grave. Nobody spoke. Richard Lawson remained staring at the floor. The confession hung in the air like smoke. Daniel never died on the bridge. Claire's mind refused to accept it. What? Her voice barely existed. Did you just say? Richard looked at her. For the first time in 17 years, there was no arrogance, only exhaustion. The bridge collapse happened. The explosion happened. But Daniel wasn't on it. Claire felt anger replacing disbelief. You expect me to believe? I've buried a stranger, Richard answered quietly. Yes, Henry closed his eyes. So he finally told you. Claire turned sharply. You knew? Henry nodded. I knew the body wasn't Daniel. Claire's voice cracked. And you let me mourn him? Henry couldn't meet her eyes. I thought it would keep you alive. Michael's image remained on the monitor. Claire, listen carefully. The bridge was supposed to be Daniel's execution. He escaped. Claire stared. He escaped? Michael nodded. With Nathan. The explosion happened 6 minutes later. Claire looked at Evelyn. Tears rolled silently down her face. "Nathan survived?" Evelyn whispered. "For 3 days." The room fell silent. Evelyn slowly sat down. "I found him." Her hands trembled. "In an abandoned maintenance building outside the city. He had burns over most of his body. He could barely speak." Claire listened without moving. "He kept asking, 'Where's Daniel?' I told him I didn't know." Evelyn closed her eyes. He smiled and said, "Good." Claire felt every piece of the story shifting again. Nathan hadn't died at the bridge. Daniel hadn't died at the bridge. Someone had rewritten history, not by changing one fact, by changing all of them. Arthur Caldwell finally spoke. Daniel had one chance: disappear, or everyone connected to him would die. Claire looked directly at him. "So who ordered it?" Arthur answered immediately. "I don't know." Richard looked up. Arthur continued. "I received the order. I never learned who issued it." Claire frowned. "You're telling me a general didn't know who he worked for?" Arthur's expression remained steady. "I knew the office, never the person," Michael interrupted. "The orders always came through one account." Henry nodded. "Black Ledger." Claire frowned. "What is Black Ledger?" Richard answered before anyone else could. "It isn't a company. It isn't an agency. It's a payment system for operations that officially never happened." Claire remembered the financial records inside the archive. Millions transferred through shell companies, anonymous accounts, project numbers, no names, just codes. She looked toward Henry. "You found the money." Henry nodded. "But never the owner." The command center suddenly emitted another warning tone. The countdown disappeared. A new message replaced it. "Second archive located." Richard's face turned white. "No!" Arthur stepped closer to the screen. "Where?" The computer answered automatically. "Location verified. Blackwater Observatory." Claire frowned. "I've never heard of it." Michael smiled for the first time. "Exactly. You weren't supposed to." Henry's breathing became uneven. "The observatory was demolished years ago." Michael shook his head. "No. They demolished the telescope, not what was underneath." Claire unfolded the photograph again. This time, the nearly invisible compass finally made sense. The 4 numbers, 7319, weren't pointing to Union Station. They were pointing away from it, toward an abandoned hill 30 miles outside the city, toward Blackwater Observatory. Daniel hadn't hidden the real archive beneath the station. He had hidden directions to it. Union Station had only been the decoy. 17 years. Richard, Arthur, Henry, even Michael. Every one of them had spent years protecting, or searching, the wrong place. Michael looked directly into the camera, then at Claire. "If you want the truth, leave now, because Richard didn't come here for this archive." Claire frowned. "Then why did he come?" Michael's expression turned deadly serious. "He came to make sure you never reached the real one." Before anyone could react, a violent explosion tore through the ceiling above the command center. Concrete collapsed. Emergency lights exploded. The room plunged into darkness, and through the dust, a laser sight settled squarely on Claire's chest. The shot, the red laser, never wavered. It rested directly over Claire's heart. Dust drifted through the darkness. Broken concrete covered the command center floor. No one moved. Arthur Caldwell slowly raised one hand. "Hold your fire." The laser disappeared, not because the shooter missed, because someone had obeyed. Claire noticed it immediately. Whoever stood above them answered to Arthur, not Richard. Emergency lights flickered back to life. Half the ceiling had collapsed. Twisted steel beams hung overhead. A rope dropped through the opening. Seconds later, 3 armed men descended into the command center. Black tactical uniforms. No insignias. No names. Night vision helmets. Professional. Disciplined. Not mercenaries. Not police. Something else. The first man approached Arthur. "Area secure, sir." Arthur nodded once, then looked toward Claire. "You see, if I wanted you dead, you already would be." Richard stepped forward. "General, we're wasting time. The observatory." Arthur cut him off. "We're not going." Richard frowned. "What?" Arthur turned slowly. "The real archive was never our objective." Claire narrowed her eyes. "Then why chase it for 17 years? Arthur looked directly at her. "We weren't chasing the archive. We were chasing Daniel." Silence. Michael's face remained frozen on the monitor, almost as if he had expected Arthur to finally admit it. Claire whispered, "Daniel survived." Arthur nodded. "For a while." Richard closed his eyes. He knew what was coming. Arthur continued. "Daniel disappeared after the bridge. He contacted exactly one person." Claire looked at Michael. "No." Arthur shook his head. "Not Michael. He contacted me." Henry stared in disbelief. "You're lying." Arthur calmly reached inside his coat. He removed a sealed military envelope. The paper had yellowed with age. Across the front. Claire recognized the handwriting instantly. Daniel's. To General Arthur Caldwell, private. Claire's hands trembled. Arthur held out the envelope. "I've never opened it. You should." Claire slowly accepted it. The seal cracked beneath her fingers. Inside. One handwritten letter. Only a single page. She began reading silently, then stopped halfway down. Her breathing caught. Henry looked at her. "What did he say?" Claire could barely force the words out. He thanked Arthur. Nobody spoke. Not even Richard. Claire continued reading. "If you're reading this, it means I failed to stop them. You were the only person who warned me before the explosion." Henry staggered backward. "No." Arthur quietly lowered his eyes. "I was too late." Richard finally spoke. "You warned him." Arthur nodded. "I tried." "Then why did he disappear?" Arthur answered without hesitation. "Because Daniel realized something." Claire looked up. "What?" Arthur met her eyes. "The people behind Black Ledger weren't trying to protect a secret. They were trying to find one." Silence filled the ruined command center. Michael slowly removed the camera from his jacket. He looked tired. Older. Almost relieved. Claire frowned. "What secret?" Michael answered. "Daniel never told anyone. Not me. Not Nathan. Not Henry. Not Arthur. Not even you." Claire whispered, "What did he find?" Michael smiled sadly. "I don't know." Arthur nodded. "Neither do I." Richard looked away. "I never knew either. For the first time since the investigation began." Claire realized something terrifying. Every person in this room had sacrificed 17 years of their lives for a secret none of them actually possessed. A soft electronic chime interrupted the silence. The computer screen changed again, not by anyone touching it. Automatically. "Welcome, Claire. Final message available. Authorization. Daniel Harper. Recorded November 1411:53 p.m. Claire froze. She looked at the timestamp again. 11:53 p.m. The bridge had officially collapsed. At 7:48 p.m., more than 4 hours earlier. Her pulse stopped. If that timestamp was genuine, then Daniel Harper had been alive, hours after the world believed he was dead. 11:53 p.m. Claire stared at the timestamp, again and again. Recorded, November 1411:53 p.m. It couldn't be correct. The official investigation stated the bridge collapsed at 7:48 p.m. Daniel Harper had been declared dead that same evening. Every newspaper, every police report, every insurance document, every court record. All agreed. Yet the computer displayed a recording created more than 4 hours later. Only one possibility remained. Daniel had survived. Claire pressed play. For several seconds. Nothing happened. Only the sound of wind. Footsteps. Heavy breathing. Then, Daniel spoke. If anyone besides Claire is hearing this, turn it off. No one moved. Even Richard remained silent. Daniel continued. Claire, if you're here, you figured out the first lie. I wasn't on the bridge. The recording shook slightly, as though Daniel were carrying the camera while walking. I don't have much time. They're already searching the valley. Nathan is injured. Michael is drawing them away. Henry doesn't know where I went. Arthur can't protect me anymore. Everything Daniel had said matched what everyone in the room had admitted. For the first time, every version of the story aligned. Daniel stopped walking. The wind disappeared. A heavy metal door opened somewhere nearby. He entered a small room. The camera briefly captured concrete walls, steel shelves, stacks of weathered document boxes. Claire leaned closer. This wasn't Union Station. It wasn't the observatory. It was somewhere else entirely. A third location. Daniel placed the camera on a table. Claire finally saw his face. Dirty, exhausted, a burn across the left side of his neck, but alive, completely alive. He looked directly into the lens. Claire, there are 3 archives. The room fell silent. 3? Daniel nodded. Union Station was meant to be found. Blackwater Observatory was meant to distract anyone who found Union Station. He paused. The 3rd archive was never meant to be discovered. Henry whispered, "Oh my God." Arthur slowly closed his eyes. Richard looked genuinely stunned. Even Michael's expression changed. None of them had known. Daniel had deceived everyone, friend and enemy alike. Claire listened without blinking. Daniel continued. If you're watching this, it means everyone failed, including me. But failure has one advantage. People stop looking. He smiled sadly. That's when the truth becomes invisible. Claire noticed something behind Daniel, mounted on the wall, a faded county survey map. One corner was torn. Most of the writing was too blurred to read, except for one label. Ravens Point Reservoir. Michael leaned toward the monitor. I know that place. Henry frowned. It was flooded. Michael nodded. 17 years ago. Arthur looked up instantly. When? Michael answered quietly. 3 weeks after the bridge collapse. The room froze. Claire understood before anyone else. Flooding. A valley. Concrete. No witnesses. No access. Daniel hadn't hidden the final archive underground. He had hidden it. Underwater. For 17 years. Daniel reached toward the camera one last time. If anyone tells you they're protecting the truth, don't believe them. Truth doesn't need protection. Only people do. He stopped, then smiled in the same quiet way Claire remembered from years ago. Claire, I never expected to survive. I only expected to leave you enough to finish what I couldn't. The recording ended. The monitor went black. No one spoke. Not Richard. Not Arthur. Not Henry. Not even Michael. Because every person in the room had just realized the same thing. For 17 years, they had been chasing archives. But Daniel Harper had never been protecting documents. He had been protecting one living witness. Someone still alive. Someone hidden so completely that even Daniel's closest allies never knew where. Then the computer emitted one final tone. A new line appeared across the screen. Last known access, Ravens Point Reservoir 9 days ago. Ravens Point 9 days ago. Claire read the words twice. Last known access, Ravens Point Reservoir 9 days ago. Her heartbeat slowed instead of quickening. Someone had reached the 3rd archive. Recently. Very recently. Not 17 years ago. 9 days. Someone else already knew. Richard Lawson stepped toward the monitor. His face had completely changed. He wasn't frightened anymore. He looked defeated. Arthur noticed. You knew. Richard didn't answer. You've known for 9 days. Richard slowly nodded. Yes. Claire looked sharply at him. Who accessed it? Richard closed his eyes. I don't know. You don't know. The system only notified me. After it happened. Henry leaned over the keyboard, rapidly checking the system logs. His fingers froze. No. Claire looked at the screen. What? Henry swallowed. The archive wasn't opened. It was copied. Silence. Not downloaded. Not viewed. Copied. Every file. Every recording. Every photograph. Gone. Michael's image remained on the monitor. He lowered his head. So we were already too late. Henry nodded. By 9 days. Claire stared at the screen. If someone copied everything, why come after us? Arthur answered immediately, because they don't know what Daniel told you. Claire frowned. What do you mean? Arthur pointed toward the final recording. Whoever copied the archive never found that message. Henry's eyes widened. They cloned the files, but not the secure partition. Arthur nodded. They stole evidence. They missed Daniel. The realization swept through the room. The archive had never been the objective. Daniel himself had always been the final piece. His reasoning, his conclusions, his identity of the last witness. Without that, the copied archive was incomplete. Claire suddenly remembered something. Daniel's last sentence. He hadn't protected documents. He had protected one living witness. She looked toward Arthur. You said nobody knew who it was. Arthur nodded. I didn't. Henry shook his head. Neither did I. Michael spoke quietly through the monitor. Nathan didn't. Evelyn whispered. He never told me. Richard slowly looked up. I searched 17 years. I never found them. Claire's breathing became uneven. There was only one person left. One person who could possibly know. Daniel. But Daniel was gone. Unless... She turned back toward the paused recording. Daniel had deliberately looked away from the camera 3 separate times. Each time. Toward something outside the frame. Not random. Intentional. She rewound the recording, frame by frame. Henry watched over her shoulder. Stop. Claire froze. What? Henry pointed toward the corner of the image, a reflection, barely visible inside a dusty metal cabinet. Not Daniel. Someone standing behind him. Only a shoulder. Part of a face. Enough to tell one thing. They were alive. They were listening. Daniel had not recorded his final message alone. Claire enlarged the reflection. The image became grainy, almost unusable. Then, one detail sharpened. A silver pendant. Small. Oval. Evelyn gasped. No. Claire looked at her. You know it? Evelyn's hands began shaking. I gave that necklace. To Nathan. Silence. Michael slowly removed his headset. Henry stepped backward. Arthur lowered his eyes. Richard whispered, impossible. Nathan Cole had officially died. 17 years earlier. Yet someone wearing his necklace had stood beside Daniel. Hours after the bridge collapse. Claire looked toward Evelyn. Could Nathan still be alive? Evelyn answered without hesitation. I buried an empty coffin. No one had another question. Because for the first time, there was real evidence. Not theory, not memory, not rumor. A reflection, a pendant, a witness. And if Nathan Cole had survived, then someone had been protecting him for 17 years. Just then, the command center lights flickered once. Every monitor went black. Then a new live video appeared. Not recorded. Live. A quiet lakeshore. Still water. Morning sunlight. The camera slowly turned. An elderly man stood on a weathered wooden dock. White beard. Worn canvas jacket. A silver oval pendant hanging around his neck. He looked directly into the camera, smiled, and said only 6 words. "Claire, I've been waiting for you."